Hi, this is Sean Cunningham, CEO of the VAB. I'm being joined today by James Rooke, who's General Manager of Effectv, and we're going to talk live sports. And in some ways, this could be, to some respect, like any January, in the sense that, we had NFL playoff games yesterday. This week, both the NBA and the NHL are going to be in action. But also this week, college basketball games were canceled because of COVID concerns. So it's anything but a normal live sports January. But there's also a set of tools that make this a very interesting sports January. And I want to talk to James today about what I consider to be one of the most important nexus points in all of advertising. And that's where you've got the sheer scale of those live sports audiences. And it sits at the intersection today of what you can do with first party data, precise first party set top box data, and what you can learn about those live sports audiences. So to me, that sheer scale and the precision of the set top box data, that's the really interesting thing. So James, let me get right into, as top of the sheer scale that we see with live sports, with the set of data tools that you have with Effectv, what are some of the data insights that you can see that others might not be able to see with the data tools, and the data insights that you have about live sports and the live sports audience?
Sure. Firstly, Sean, it's great to chat to you again. I think this is the second one we've done in COVID, so good to see you again. I hope as well. So look, it's a great question. I think sports is a fascinating topic to kind of cover as it pertains to the intersect of data and audience-based buying based on what happened in 2020 with COVID. And sports remains such an important anchor for advertisers who either want to target specific sports content or take a more audience-based approach and target those viewers wherever they're viewing the content. And what our aggregate set-top box data from Comcast allows us to do is derive really important insights into viewing behaviors of those sports viewers. And what we've done is we've translated those insights into a sports matrix to help our advertisers find adjacencies to their audiences in order to continue to reach them successfully. What that really means is we can use the power of our Comcast set-top box data to better construct campaigns that continue to kind of follow the sports audience across programming in a really reliable and a consistent way. And as you kind of said at the top, this type of insight is really important at the moment, particularly as sports schedules continue to change. And what we found is that sports viewing hasn't decreased. In fact, the opposite has been true. But rather, these sports super fans tend to move and watch other sports when their kind of core, number one sport that they watch isn't on TV. And while it's an obvious insight that fans across the board have diverse interests in terms of different sports, what really matters, and this is where the data comes in, is specifically understanding what those interests are, so you can enable advertisers to better target them. And our data is showing us that about 55% of really heavy sports viewers typically watch 3 or more sports on a consistent basis, and that there are different groups of, call them super fans, that tend to gravitate consistently to the kind of second, third, or fourth sports that they watch. So as an example, Major League Baseball super fans tend to typically over-index to watch the NHL, golf, and NCAA basketball. So overall, what's really critical is being able to start with first-party deterministic data to drive those types of insights out. So against the backdrop of wild kind of shifting schedules in sports, advertisers can continue to follow their audience despite those changes.
James, it's interesting that you were talking about the super fans and using baseball as an example. And I'm a hardcore baseball fan, but I'm also a serious hockey nut. And so for me, that's one of the insights that Matrix would have worked beautifully on, as well as for me in other sports. But for me, the great thing about the sports audience, the live sports audience, is it's personal. At that baseball, hockey, I consider those essentially food groups, and to be able to, to reach me. If not, my 1A and my 1B is terrific now. But I've got to ask, because clearly, the Matrix and the other first party data set tools that you have were put to the test. If you think about everything that was displaced starting in March of 2020, where you had full advertising campaigns ready to go for, for sports dependent advertisers. And were you able to, use the data insights that you have to be able to, replace en masse, if you will, entire schedules when you were looking for these displaced sports fans? Were you able to pull that off in 2020?
Yeah, look, our data was put to the test, but in a way that looking back is only going to be good for our business, and I hope also the industry also, which maybe we can talk about a little bit later. It was a very difficult time for everyone, and it took a bit of time to adjust. But as you know, our client base runs the spectrum from very small businesses all the way up to the largest agencies and brands. And if there was one kind of shared need, which you just hit on a second ago, across our client base, it was giving them confidence that we could continue to deliver against their target audience, despite the significant shifts in both sports programming, but also kind of more broadly, the significant shifts in viewing habits as people move to remote work. We found huge success in leaning in with the data to help instill confidence that we were able to continue to deliver those coveted sports audiences, even as sports programming either went away completely or shifted. And so it's really highlighted the importance of first-party deterministic data to be able to kind of demonstrate, as we did, the sports audience didn't go away when COVID hit and sports programming went away. It just shifted, and it shifted to new places, and we were able to kind of use that aggregate Comcast data to be able to demonstrate where the viewing shifted to, and then adjust those campaigns to be able to continue to hit those target audiences despite those viewership changes.
Yeah, so these data-driven actionable insights and the experience
That's right.
These advertisers, use the tool, not in test mode, in live mode, campaigns, things that registers have to ring, and you need to continue to have the results in a very tough advertising environment. So when the fruits were seen of being able to pursue this live sports audience wherever they were, do you think that changed the way that your advertisers may now think about sports advertising, meaning that they may not be thinking it from a content first perspective, which is the way we've always thought about sports, and the attractive properties in sports were, by name: basketball, hockey, football, baseball, that type of thing. Do you think now that they're starting to understand that the advantage is in thinking about it from a sports audience and live sports audience first perspective?
Yeah, look, I'm convinced that's the case, and I think there's no going back. We've seen such a major shift since COVID started toward audience-based buying. And in my opinion, what happened with sports in our country was really the catalyst more broadly for a shift in the media industry to more audience-based executions. Now, that was granted happening already, but it has just been moved or fast forwarded at a pace that none of us ever could have predicted before. And that's not to say that buying against content, specific shows or specific sports programming at specific times is going to go away. I don't think that will at all. There are coveted events. Think Monday Night Football, think the Olympics, think the Super Bowl, et cetera, which will remain kind of, I think, as they are. But just more broadly speaking, there's so much great sports content out there that using it as an anchor, but being able to use the data to demonstrate how you can follow that audience wherever they go with their viewing behavior. Sports has kind of highlighted the importance of doing that because of what happened with sports programming early in COVID. So I think that there's just going to be an acceleration of a movement, not just within sports programming, but overall towards kind of more audience-based executions. And I think that will get accelerated further by the fact that viewing continues to kind of fragment against more distribution channels. And so an advertiser needs the ability to be able to execute not just across where viewing is taking place on more kind of linear television distribution channels, but also across streaming TV, and the ability to bring those two together and provide kind of one campaign, one plan, one report, one bill at the back end across that multi-screen TV inventory is absolutely critical. And we've been really leaning in with the data to be able to kind of demonstrate the return on investment benefit of moving to a more audience-based execution. So last year, as an example, we finished a study which was, I think, across 100,000 campaigns and 30 million commercial airings, where we were able to demonstrate that on average, campaigns that aired on more networks had double the reach compared to those that executed on kind of less than 10 networks. And that was regardless of the spend level. And that's a pretty significant insight because I think as an industry, we're going to have to continue to lean in and demonstrate with results the benefit of moving to an audience-based execution. So proof of performance will become really critical, I think, in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, it's interesting. You take the combination of, the trial by fire, if you will, and you think about what's transpired since March and all of the things that you needed to do for, all of your, advertisers that were covering live sports audiences, and the tools you're able to use, and the ability to get those campaigns well done, plus the study that you mentioned, which is, obviously an enormous study. Kind of a combination of those two things for your customer base and people who have nothing to do with live sports, but just the advent of audience-based buying and moving, to truly driven by, sophisticated first-party data-driven insights as the way to go over content. In a way, the way I was thinking about it, you may have, done 36 months worth of progress in 10 months, sort of folded the map, if you will. So now, when you're talking to clients, and it feels like we're on the cusp of this pivot, and it's been accelerated by things we didn't foresee in February of last year. But now we really are quite advanced with what we've been able to do. When you describe to clients the benefits of data-driven audience-based buying, who maybe really long-term clients that you've got a great working relationship with, and they've got great monetization, finding good audiences, they're all looking to find the next best audience. Is there an aha moment when you talk to them where it just clicks and makes sense, and they're able to say, okay, yeah, let's do it? Is there a common, we've talked about some of the crystallizing points, but for your client set, and we're talking to, people you've got, long successful relationships with, is there an aha moment where it just clicks into the place and they're saying, yeah, okay, sign me up, let's do it?
Yeah, listen, I think you summed it up nicely a second ago, which is what happened in 2020 because of the impact of COVID accelerated, I would argue, behaviors in the industry 3 to 5+ years in a matter of months. And overall, that's a good thing from an advertising standpoint, because the traditional media companies in particular were already moving against a set of pivot points that were critical if the industry is to kind of remain competitive relative to many of the large kind of technology, the large tech companies, tech platform companies. And so I think we've passed the tipping point, and now there are a number of kind of execution related challenges that need to be overcome, which I can get into later if helpful. But as it pertains to the ahas, I think where we've seen success this year, recognizing that because of the rapid shift that happened, you're still dealing with having to drive behavior changes where multi-screen TV, or I guess before streaming TV existed, just linear TV was typically bought on content. So, despite what we've been talking about with COVID, it's still years and years of behavior change that needs to be kind of rewired. And that takes time. And so for our sales team, the real successes have been seen when we've been leaning in with data-driven stories, where we can work with our clients to get them to trust the data and be able to kind of demonstrate the ROI uplift of taking a more audience-based execution. And that's particularly important with more traditional advertisers for the reason I said a second ago. I think talking of kind of trusting the data, that is one of the most important initial ahas, is that advertisers are inundated with a bunch of solutions and there's a lot of noise out there. And recognizing the difference between being able to plan campaigns and deliver campaigns successfully on the foundation of first-party deterministic data sets versus third-party modeled data sets is really critical, because obviously there's a big difference between knowing how many times any given household was exposed to a campaign versus modeling whether they're likely to be exposed. And so breaking this down and helping to explain the data in simple ways and demonstrate that not all data sets are created equal has been really kind of critical for us. That's kind of number one. The second I touched on a second ago, which is it's on us to have to prove it. And so where we've seen success is being able to ensure that we have the right back-end attribution to be able to demonstrate side by side the difference between taking a more kind of content-based versus audience-based execution. And one thing we found helpful is really breaking that down, whereby we may take a more phased approach by say, hey, let us demonstrate just on linear TV, if you're used to just buying that, historically, the ROI uplift of a demo-based campaign versus an audience-based execution. And then phase two is layering on TV streaming inventory and saying, and on top of that, let us demonstrate the incremental lift by allowing us to execute that campaign and follow that audience across both TV and streaming TV. And it's the combination of the two, taking an audience-based plus a multi-screen approach, which we see the most value in. And those are the kind of aha moments that are happening every single day. And if I look at the data in our business, there's been such a significant shift in terms of the total number of kind of campaigns we're executing against audience versus the traditional way. I believe we're past the tipping point, and there's really no going back.
Yeah, and I think that accelerant is the key one. I talked about an aha moment, or when it clicks in, and to be able to do that with a completed data loop, and to have the sophistication of saying, look, I've modeled your ROI lifts here, I've modeled your side-by-sides versus
Exactly.
a content-based approach, and if you will, here's your way you would have done it for content and GRPs, and here's the way you're going to do it with respect to, impressions and audience-based buying. And, here are your bottom line ROIs, and here are, the campaign lifts, and here are the effects on digital. I think that, in a way, to use a bad expression, that's the great convincer. So, I think that completes the loop with respect to, sophisticated first-party data and its effects on business. If there's one thing I think if we can be pleased with anything that came out of, what was an incredibly challenging 10 months, is I think we did fold the map with respect to, our insights and our industry and our data. And I think we're moving forward now at a rapid clip that may not have occurred as quickly as the trajectory that we were on. It would have occurred, but not this quickly.
Yeah, I agree. However, there's always a however. There are some kind of big barriers that will stop us kind of reaching escape velocity on this. As an industry, I think we have to rally around. And Sean, you and I have talked about these a couple of times. One is around audience segment definition. If you're an advertiser, it's not just about advertising with Effectv. It's about, I want to reach my target audience across a multitude of different inventory owners. And so right. How we get to more common definition of audience segments becomes important if we're going to simplify things for an advertiser. So, we're working closely with our partner Ampersand as an example, on that. I know for national programmers, if you look at initiatives like OpenAP, are looking to solve for that. But that becomes really important because television overall has to simplify how it is bought. And if we're going to move to an audience-based execution, then segment definitions becomes kind of one of many kind of execution priorities. And the second one we've talked about before is we're going to move to more of an audience-based world, particularly when you execute across multi-screen TV. Then you got to move away from Nielsen gross rating points, and you got to move to an impression-based model. Like that is just foundational. So I think there are some kind of big boulders that we need to collectively work on if we are to kind of reach that escape velocity. I think we passed the tipping point, as I said earlier, but it's not just what we can do within our individual kind of companies that we work in. I think it's what we can do as an industry to really kind of make this kind of as scaled as possible.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way for us to wind down today, is that you're absolutely right in that you can solve for all the myriad of things that you've innovated and solved for through your capabilities on your platform. But knowing that what the advertisers' needs are and their sales goals are, and the way that they think about their investment, having common audience definitions and thinking across multiple platforms, multiple publishers, thinking about it from a local perspective, regional perspective, national perspective, and understanding that it all needs to fit under common definitions. Totally agree that in 2020, those are the headlines of we need to make them from boulders to things that are in motion. And I think that the most important thing is that we've all pointed to them, we've named them, we've said these are the priorities. Now it's time to move the boulders. So I appreciate the time and all of the insights, and sports has changed a heck of a lot for the better, and I think we really did fold the map in since March, and learning a lot and inspiring advertisers to get to their next best audience. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate the time as always.